Hey everybody. So I hope your week is going well. So I'm just doing this video. I decided I don't usually watch a lot of the videos from Carlos King's YouTube channel because I'm just not interested. Um, but I did decide to watch the interview with Kenya and with Nene, and the one with Kenya I think just dropped today. Kenny Moore, and sometimes these kind of interviews can be helpful in getting to know who somebody is behind the scenes or how they may not have been depicted properly. And the reason why I gave it a chance, particularly with Kenya Moore, is because I remember seeing something on TV One. I can't remember if it was Unsung, Uncensored, whatever it was. And Sheree Whitfield was on there. And Sheree Whitfield was telling the story about how she got involved with Housewives and so on and so forth. And she said she went to see the premiere of the first season. And after that, she called her friend and was like, who was an executive or whatever, who wasn't on the show, but a TV show executive, and was just like, she was like, I just got done watching the season. I look like a complete bitch. And her friend was like, well, that's just the way it works with the editing, whatever. And when I got done watching, just maybe in like that hour documentary, my whole idea and perception of Sheree really changed. It really to me became, this is just how she's depicted on this show. This is how she acts on a show. And the reason, and what confirmed it wasn't simply that TV One thing, but I remember even watching the show, and Sheree not being one of my favorites, but Sheree being on the show to me still made for a good ensemble cast. This was back when I actually watched Real Housewives of Atlanta. And I remember saying, for her to act the way she acts, she has really great kids. Like, her kids are very polite, they're very respectful. Even as like younger kids, and then they get older, they go to college, like all three of them. So it was just like it it made sense that this was a depiction because clearly you can't be a great mother, which I do think she is, have kids that turn out like that and be the person they were depicting her as. And so I was really hoping that this would change my perception of somebody like Kenya. Kenya, I didn't like you on season 5 when you came on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I don't like you now. You are what I thought you were. I think Kenya is an incredibly beautiful woman. I think she's an incredibly smart woman. Facts. Well, I shouldn't say facts. I believe that. Okay, I don't think there is anybody that could honestly deny that she is like one of the most beautiful people anybody has ever seen in the world. She just is. But Kenya just comes across to me as very, very fake. Her laugh has always seemed fake to me. Um, she came across to me as very cruel and very hurtful with a lot of the things she did. And in watching this Carlos King interview, I was like, yeah, I can see why they like each other because Carlos King comes across to me as fake. Because he does the Wendy Williams thing. He has these people on interviews, and you might see clips of him like when you scroll Instagram. Like I said, I don't really, watch his interviews. But he'll be friends with them, and the next thing you know, he's engaging with the cattiness from somebody who might be on the same cast of a particular show, and he's saying something negative after he just interviewed, like that Wendy Williams thing, and I don't rock with it. So Kenya clearly seems to me, like I said, Kenya is smart. Kenya seems to me to be over the Real Housewives of Atlanta. We all know she already has an exit plan. Her talking about her hair care line, which I think actually is even something, despite the way I feel about her, would try because her hair has always looked amazing. Amazing. Okay? And it's natural and it's beautiful. Carlos brings up, do you think that you've gotten flack on this show all these years and been misrepresented? Kind of like Candace Dillard Bassett on The Real Housewives of Potomac, the colorism issue, so on and so forth. Now, I've given my opinion on this in many different cases. colorism varies because even as Carlos pointed out, he was like, well, the one thing I hated between you and Portia and Kenya, was that you all seemed like the two chocolate girls or dark skin girls fighting for position. She was like, she's not chocolate. She might be caramel, but she's not chocolate, right? And this is what I mean when I say colorism is difficult and it's more of an intraracial thing than larger perception. Not that it doesn't have impact on the larger society. I'm just making a point. It tends to be very subjective how people see you as far as a complexion. Anyway, I don't think it's as applicable in the same way. And I know that's going to seem like a weird thing to say, because both Kenya and Candace are pageant girls. Both Kenya and Candace can say things that can really get at people's core and hurt them, and they do use their words to fight, so on and so forth. Pageant girls see a lot of what they also are judged on and in the process of becoming one is their face. So no, they can't fight out in the street and have black and blue eyes and scars like strippers or just regular chicks. They can't do that. So they learn how to take their aggression out through their mouth, and they can say things that make people want to drag them, i.e. Portia dragging Kenya. And I can tell you how I know Portia whooped her ass good. Because let me tell you something. When somebody beats your ass good enough, you don't talk about them the same way. You don't do the same stuff you was doing before. You see, Kenya slowed her roll in this interview, didn't you? That's all I got to say. Monique dragging Candace was overdue. She was over fucking due. Okay? And I think the colorism thing is a little bit different for Candace Dillard Bassett, because she is on a cast of primarily very, very light complexioned, less arguably, like, oh, I'm not sure if the person's caramel or dark, like the Portia thing, or like a Drew Sidora thing, or a Nene thing. Like, that's a different cast color, right? Whereas I think with Potomac, the contrast in skin color, I do think it sets up more of a case for Candace, in a way it doesn't for Kenya. Although I do think that Candace is mean and catty, and coming from the pageant world, has experienced, and as a winner in the pageant world, experienced life very differently than the average chick. But okay. Kenya, however, I remember coming onto the Real Housewives of Atlanta, and Kenya was very clear. She was like, I represent for the chocolate girls, this, that, and the other. And I never felt a way or that it was divisive in the black community. I actually liked that part of her. Because I thought that was so important, that somebody who is considered a dark-skinned woman was like, I think it's important that other dark-skinned girls see me and see what I've accomplished, and particularly in the beauty realm, when we have certain ideas of what beauty is, period. And she never said it like, to me, Kenya wasn't a victim in the way that I feel like Candace tries to be a victim around her skin complexion. Kenya was very much like, I know that dark-skinned girls get treated a certain way, particularly in the pageant world, in society, and I want to be an inspiration to them. And that, to me, was admirable. And I always liked that, even when I didn't like her. I always liked the fact that Kenya, despite how she may have felt about you, whether she was fighting, she was very clear about her position on domestic violence and men putting their hands on women. Just like her and Sheree weren't getting along that time when they were like on vacation in the car. And Bob said something when Sheree alluded to the fact that he tried to choke her one time. And he was like, but did you die? And her and Kenya had like a knockdown, drag out, kind of argument fight the night before. And Kenya was like, first of all, that's not funny. Like, everything else, whatever her problems were with Sheree, she shut that shit down. And she was very clear about where she stood on that. And I respected that so much. So I say that to say, I wanted this interview to change the way I thought about Kenya, but I think Kenya's shit is fake. I just think she's fake when she talks about all this. But at the same time, she's real about where the show is. I don't know anywhere else it can go. And she's talking about, how she earned her peach, how she wasn't a fan of the show, this, that, and the other. And I remember, maybe she wasn't a fan of the show, but I remember her name was floating around at one point. Because, like I said, I was a fan of the show. And people had asked her on Twitter, and she was like, I would never be caught up in a show that depicts black women like, like that. And then she was like on it. And that's what I mean by fake. I don't think she gives a fuck how Bravo reacts to this interview. I don't. And she talks about, spinoffs and favoritism, how she was never protected. I can totally see why she feels that way. I don't like her, but I also hate Giselle. And Giselle gets protected, I think, with her cattiness and her bullshit all the fucking time. Period. I think Candace maintains a level of protection for the fact that she sat up there and instigated that fight with Monique, so on and so forth, and has managed to be on this show saying some of the dirtiest things she can say to get at people's core. We know Nene was protected in large part. Cynthia was protected. I can definitely see why Kenya feels that way, and I actually do think that's true. Because what has she done is any worse than what anybody else does on any housewife shows, right? So it's not the facts so much in regards to that. But I think Kenya was also downplaying her role in terms of the nasty things that she's done. Oh, I've never been on the wrong side of history and this, that, and the other. And I think if Portia could play it over, I would be her big sister. Kenya. You want to go back to that moment on season 5 when only you and Portia were taping and she invited you to a charity event? And yes, we can talk about the fact that Portia seemed to know very little about civil rights. Hell, she didn't even know what the hell an Underground Railroad was. Facts. And when you said I think she single-handedly is ruining her grandfather's legacy. Yeah. Yes. But when you start talking about how she was having that charity event, how her husband just showed up and gave her a purse, how you didn't like it, girl, you had some idea of what reality TV was. I do think you watched the show. You may not have been a fan of it, but I do think it was an opportunity for you to make money and to be on there and to be extra. And she's like, she called me Miss America when I was Miss USA. Kenya, I understand it's your title. I understand correcting people. But Kenya, you were nasty about it. You were rude about it. She was like, oh, she just laughed it off. Well, that's a big deal to me. Okay. That's something you could have said, not in front of a crowd of people when they're trying to raise money for hungry children. Honestly, because that seemed more like, to me, a nervous reaction, because Portia goes, oh, I apologize. Miss USA. Like, she wasn't nasty about it. She wasn't rude about it. You were. And you created that. And yes, I do think that you were jealous of Portia. I think you were jealous because she had a husband, despite how bad he was, that she may have been in a better position, at least in your mind, to have a child. I think Kenya is used to being the pretty woman whenever she walks into any room, and Portia threatened that. And we can go back and forth, oh, who's pretty? It doesn't matter. I'm not saying that jealousy is logical. What I am saying is that I do think Kenya was jealous of her. I do think Kenya throwing a scepter in Portia's face, season 6, and telling her, oh, she was like, well, look, I think you were jealous of me because I had a husband. Well, you ain't have many more. You ain't got them no more. I bet you won't do this. I bet you won't do that. And she was like, well, and then Kenya in the interview was like, well, I fight with my words. I fight with my words. That's the same thing Candace said. And that may be the way you're trained. But at the point in which you are doing things to other people that are really hurting and cutting at who they are, you can't expect them to fight the same way. That's why you have to be careful. Watch your mouth and watch what you say. You got dragged and you deserved it and you provoked that situation. Cut it out. Cut it out. Oh, she may have been dealing with a lot of stuff that I didn't realize then or whatever. She said, and I feel like me and Kenya could have been friends because now I understand. That's the point. But Kenya said that to you. Now you understand how I felt. Portia said that to you on the show before I stopped watching. So, baby, don't try to front on us like we're just misunderstanding you. what you did was wrong. Now, I, I'm sorry, I can't bring myself to say Portia was wrong for dragging you. I can't. I felt like you deserved it then, and I honestly felt vindicated that somebody as sweet as Portia is, um, would not be physically fighting. And you could bring up, oh, she had the other two altercations. I felt like the cast was playing that up way too much. The way they played it up way too much with Monique. When Monique was on Potomac, that there are isolated incidents that can happen where people get upset and get out of character. Period. Okay? That part. Then the stuff with Phaedra. Now, we know Phaedra lies. We know Apollo probably lied. Because, I mean, just his regular. All right? But Kenya, I don't know whether you followed him to his hotel room or whatever. You did make a great point, though. Like, nobody saw us. Nobody. I don't know. And you were like, I've never seen him outside of tape. Never seen him, not even randomly. Well, the thing was, Kenya, that some of the housewives were saying about you, even at that time, was the issue that they didn't see you outside of taping either, even in the off season, because you're not Atlanta. You're not from Atlanta. You spent most of your time in LA. Real Housewives of Atlanta was a job for you, which is why you could come on there and say some of the lowest, dirtiest stuff that you could say. And that's how I know you were also watching the show. Because the kind of reads that you would do were either reads where you were playing off of something that had been said 2-3 seasons before, or something bloggers had talked about. Like, it was very, and Candace Diller Bassett does the same thing. Oh, she's a wordsmith. She's a wordsmith because she said she's a wordsmith. I can even tell by her reads that she watched Phaedra Parks and imitated that. It's not because she's that smart. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just not checking for it. Okay? Educated and smart are two different things to me. I'm sorry, I've seen enough dummies in my life to know the difference. So, we're going to act like you weren't in the confessional, which may have been edited. Apollo's kind of fine. To be followed up on vacation, and you're flirting with her husband, which he was at fault for too. But you're flirting with a married man, throwing him in the pool and playing this, that, and the other with somebody's husband. We saw that, Kenya. We saw that, and it didn't look good. It happened on more than one occasion, you flirting with Apollo, and Apollo was dead ass wrong, disrespecting Phaedra like that, so on and so forth. And yes, if you hurt somebody, what you can expect is for them to do something dirty to you on TV as well. And despite how you acted, I do remember when that issue happened in Flint, Michigan, that despite how Phaedra felt about you, despite how you felt about her, New York City, despite how you felt about her, she drove with your ass and went up there to make sure people had clean water. I remember that episode. So don't act like she was not able to put stuff aside either. Okay? So I'm not going to play that game either. All right? Both of y'all did some low down dirty stuff. That being said, so when we talk about colorism and favoritism, like I said, I think it's different in Atlanta than it is, not because the culture necessarily is different, but the show itself in terms of casting. And Potomac is not the same thing. Once again, I think Candace makes a much better case because of the surrounding things. Speaking of Potomac, so I was watching something from a YouTuber who was discussing, well, Kenya didn't show her wedding on Bravo, and we didn't get Robin's whole wedding either. And I think what Robin did was way worse. Okay. First of all, I don't. And I'm going to tell you why I don't. I think I can speak for myself. I was much more interested in who Kenya was marrying, the fact that Kenya was getting married, who she was going to get married to, because she had talked about that. She had made that clear on the show that she wanted a husband, she wanted a baby. I remember her saying, if God can give Sarah a baby at 90, he can certainly give me one. And so I think we were interested, and we didn't know this guy or whatever. And I do respect her decision to not film something that is that personal, that's sacred to you. I totally respected that. How it came off to me when they tried to basically punish her, Bravo punished her for not putting her wedding on TV, was basically Black bitch, we own you. We can tell you what we'll film and what we won't. You don't get to tell us. Okay? And a real chick will put her foot down, and that's what Kenya decided to do. But that's the way it came off to me. Why is this not the same thing as Robin? We had that broke down footage of Robin. Okay, so Bravo showed up. We had labels on it. It wasn't just camera phone footage. And 3, nobody gave a fuck. Nobody gave a fuck. Her and what's his name? See how unimportant this is. Juan Dixon were always living together. Never stopped living together even after their divorce. Their children are there. Their parents show up, and that's it. And we didn't. Nothing changed about her situation as a result. We just saw this as same old, same old. That's all we did. So no, I don't think it's the same. I do think the fact that Bravo had an opportunity to go through the footage, had access to it, is different. And I also think of the fans' demand to see certain things. Nobody cared about Robin's wedding. I don't understand why Robin's still on that show. She's boring. She offers nothing. She is Giselle's lackey. She's not even an enjoyable lackey. Like, I just don't get it. So, no, I don't think it's the same thing. And Kenya was talking about how she hadn't been offered spinoffs, but that Kandi had been offered multiple spinoffs. And quite frankly, Kim Zolciak getting offered Tardy for the part. I don't even understand why that show was on for so long. Yes, I do. Because she was a white woman on a black cast, and they gave her her own show after not coming to work, essentially. Not going on trips, not tolerating any of the stuff that the rest of them had to tolerate for their check. Okay? So I'd feel a way about that too. But I also think, and this is once again where I feel like the colorism thing gets murky, because if that's going to be the case in terms of spinoffs with Atlanta, we have to consider the fact that Kandi is a dark-skinned woman. I guess she would fall into that category. To me, she's the brown girl, but like I said, I see things differently, and it's subjective. But she would be, I think more close to the Kenya's complexion or whatever, has gotten multiple spinoffs. Now, this is what we also have to consider. Kandi is a businesswoman, a consistent businesswoman. She's good at making deals for herself, making deals for her family, to make money, to ensure building wealth. She is the one person we've watched who does not live above her means. So she knows what she's doing. And also, I think Kandi is much more likable. I think Kandi is probably easier to work with. Whether you find her boring or not. And we do when she did have her spinoffs, I watched them. I was entertained by them. And Kenya, I do think they're punishing you for not giving them that footage. I think you can be a diva and rude and mean. And that may not be with everybody. You and Carlos getting along doesn't do anything for me changing the way I feel about you. You and Carlos get along because y'all are both fake. And y'all got to be the fakest people I've ever met from Detroit. Y'all grew up in the suburbs? Because that is not the kind of Detroit people I have met. But okay. Anyway, so you have that. And, I do get her storyline may have been diminished. This season, I haven't been watching at all because I'm not interested. But her building her hair care line, yeah, she's absolutely right. It is important. And it is an example. That's why I feel like she already has an exit plan. I don't know. And it just seems to me, Carlos seems invested and associated with the Real Housewives because that's, I guess, where he started. But Carlos didn't pitch a show for the dream cast, okay? The Nene who's not coming back to Bravo, Kenya, so she can be exposed. Because honestly, we can say what we want about Love and Marriage, Huntsville, and all the silly dynamics, this and that. But when Mel shows up, even though I have no interest in real estate or anything like that, I learned a lot about it. And how she, repairs houses, all that kind of thing. She stays on her grind. She stays on her businesses so that she can provide a lifestyle for herself and for her kids. And I think that's wonderful. So then fine. Pitch another show on OWN. That can work. That can work. But anyway, it didn't change the way I feel about you. I'm sorry. I still just find you fake. I just find you fake. This is just my thoughts. See you all soon.